Have you ever imagined having such a great force that you could defeat whole armies with your own hands? Samson, one of Israel's judges, was not just a man with impressive muscles, but someone whose life was marked by a divine call, intense challenges and choices that changed his trajectory. He was not invincible only physically, but also spiritually until the moment he gave up his covenant with God. In this journey, we will explore every detail of Samson's life, from his miraculous birth to his last act of strength and redemption. You will discover deep truths about obedience, purpose, and what really means to be strong. So get ready, because this story is full of action, betrayal, miracles, and unexpected twists. Click the button below, subscribe, and enable notifications to track the rest of this powerful journey with us. Samson's story is not just about epic battles against the Philistines or superhuman achievements, but about a greater purpose and the price of decisions. As a man consecrated from birth, his destination was already drawn, but his journey was full of ups and downs. What can we learn from your victories? And especially with your failures? Get ready to dive into a narrative full of action, betrayal, faith, and redemption. From miraculous birth to final act of revenge, every detail of Samson's life brings deep teachings. And the most surprising, you can identify with more parts of the story than you think. Israel lived difficult times. The people, who should walk in the ways of God, had moved away, and as a consequence, fell under the rule of the Philistines. For 40 years, this oppression brought suffering and shame, leaving the Israelites without the strength to react. But God never leaves his plans. In the midst of the crisis, he was already preparing someone special to bring liberation. This one was Samson, a man whose story would start even before his birth. One day an angel of the Lord appeared to the wife of Manoah, an Israeli man. She was barren and had never had children, but she received extraordinary news. She would give birth to a boy who would be consecrated to God from the womb. It would not be an ordinary warrior, but someone with a supernatural force, given by the Spirit of the Lord. He would be the divine answer to the oppression of the Philistines. Imagine the surprise of this couple. A promised son, designed to fulfill such a great purpose. Samson grew up with this mission over his shoulders. He was not just a strong man, he was a chosen one, someone separated for a specific work. However, having a call does not mean that everything would be easy. His journey would show that even with extraordinary gifts, personal choices make all the difference. Would he honor his purpose or be carried away by his own wills? Since before he was born, Samson was already destined for a special commitment to God. He would be a Nazi, someone separate to the Lord with specific restrictions. This meant I couldn't cut your hair, drink wine, or touch nothing unclean. This vote was not just a set of rules, but a symbol of its consecration. His physical strength did not come from his muscles, but from the covenant he kept with God. As you followed this path, nothing could defeat you. This kind of vote was serious and required discipline. If Samson remained faithful, he would continue to receive power from the Spirit of the Lord to fulfill his mission. However, obedience has always been a challenge for humans, and with Samson it would be no different. The temptation to follow your own desires would become a problem throughout your life. After all, what is the use of having an incredible gift if your own choices sabotage your purpose? Samson's vote teaches us a lot about commitment and fidelity. We often want to see God act in our lives, but we don't want to pay the price of obedience. Like him, we also have areas where we need to be firm. What separates us to God today? What are the distractions that threaten to break our covenant with him? These are questions we should ask ourselves by reflecting on the history of this man. Samson was an impulsive man, and that was clear when he decided to marry a Philistine woman. His parents tried to warn him, asking if there was no one in Israel that he could choose, but he insisted. For him, the young woman's appearance was enough. What Samson did not realize is that this decision would be the beginning of a series of conflicts with the Philistines. Even so, God would use the situation to fulfill his plan. During the wedding party, Samson decided to challenge the guests with a puzzle, based on an earlier event when he killed a lion and later found honey inside the animal's carcass. He proposed the following charade: from what he eats, food came out, and from a fork came out sweetness. The Philistines could not decide for the puzzle, and, desperate to win, pressed Samson's wife to pull his response. Unfortunately, she gave in to the blackmail When Samson found that his wife had revealed the riddle, her frustration was huge. Feeling betrayed, he came out furious and, to pay the bet with the Philistines, killed 30 men to get their robes and deliver as a prize. This was only the first of many conflicts that he would have with his enemies. The story was just beginning, and the Philistines would soon realize that messing with Samson would have severe consequences. The betrayal at marriage lit a flame of revenge in Samson. Upon return to pick up his wife, he found that she had been given to another man. That was the drop of water. In an act of fury, he took 300 foxes, tied torches to his tails, and released them in the fields of the Philistines. The result? Whole plantations were destroyed, causing huge damage to Israel's enemies. The enraged Philistines sought retaliation, beginning a cycle of revenge. It was not long before the Philistines tried to capture him. In response, the Israelites themselves, fearing reprisals, decided to hand over Samson to their oppressors. Tied and taken as a prisoner, he seemed defeated. But when the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, his strings together broke into cotton threads. Taking a simple donkey jaw, he defeated 1,000 Philistine soldiers. An impressive feat, but also showed how his power came from God, and not just his brute force. Despite this great victory, Samson felt on his skin that trusting his own strength was limits. After the combat, exhausted and thirsty, he cried God, recognizing that without him he would not have survived. God, in response, made water gush and rock, renewing his strength. This episode reminds us of something fundamental. Even the strongest need to depend on the Lord. Without it, even the giants fall. Samson had won another battle, but his challenges were far from over. The fame of Samson as an enemy number one of the Philistines only grew. They had tried to capture him before, but they were always surprised by their huge strength. However, in a moment of carelessness, he eventually surrounded in the city of Gaza. Apparently cornered, the Philistines believed they would finally arrest him to dawn. But Samson didn't wait for the night to pass. In the middle of the dawn, he simply pulled the city gates, carrying them to the top of the lot. This humiliating act showed that his enemies did not yet have the power to stop him. Even so, the Philistines would not give up so easy. They knew that their strength came from a secret, and if they could discover it, they could defeat it. His persistence would bear fruit when Samson got involved with the wrong woman, Delilah. Unlike other battles, this time it would not be your strength that would decide the result, but your choices. He still didn't realize that the biggest enemy was not outside, but inside himself. Samson was physically invincible, but emotionally vulnerable. The Philistines realized that their weakness was in the heart and would use it against him. With promises and pressures, Delilah would start a dangerous game to discover his secret. The warrior who had defeated whole armies was about to face the biggest test of his life. How could someone so strong fall so easily? The problem was not a lack of power, but lack of discernment. Samson fell in love with Delilah, and that was his ruin. The Philistines, knowing the influence she had on him, offered her a fortune to pull the secret of her strength. Moved by greed, Delilah began to press him, repeatedly asking where his power came from. At first, Samson played with her, giving false answers. But her insistence was like a constant drip, wearing her resistance. The strongest man in the world was being overcome not by the sword, but by manipulation. After several unsuccessful attempts, Delilah finally got what she wanted. Samson, tired of resisting, revealed that his strength came from his hair, a symbol of Naziria's vote. As soon as she slept on her lap, she called the Philistines, who scraped her head and arrested him. When he woke up, he thought he could still fight, but something terrible had happened. The Spirit of the Lord had left him. Without God's presence, he was just an ordinary, vulnerable, and defenseless man. Delilah's betrayal was expensive to Samson. The Philistines not only captured him, but blinded him and took him chained to Gaza. The great warrior, who had humiliated his enemies so many times, now was a source of mockery. This moment teaches a harsh truth. When we play with what could destroy us, sooner or later we pay the price. Samson had lost everything: his strength, his freedom, and his vision. But that would not be the last scene in its history. The Philistines not only arrested Samson, but made him a spectacle of humiliation. Blind and chained, he was forced to rotate a mill like a cargo animal. the great warrior of Israel, who already crushed armies, was now laughing in Gaza. But while your enemies celebrated, something was happening. Your hair started to grow again. And with that, the hope that God could still use it once again. The day of a great feast has come in honor of God Dagon, the false god of the Philistines. To mock Samson, they brought him to the temple, packed with leaders and viewers. They moved from him, without realizing that this would be his fatal error. Samson, even blind, said one last prayer. He asked God to return his strength to defeat his enemies. Guided by a servant, he touched the columns that supported the temple and, with a supernatural effort, pushed them until the whole structure collapsed. Samson died that day, but not without fulfilling his mission. He knocked down the temple, killing thousands of Philistines, including the main enemy leaders. His last act was his greatest victory. Even with his flaws and falls, God still used it to free Israel. Its history teaches us that no matter how much we will, there is always room for redemption. The question is, let's hope to lose everything to recognize our dependence on God. Samson's story teaches us that gifts and talents are not enough if they are not accompanied by character and obedience. He received a supernatural force, but his choices led him to ruin. How many times are talented people waste their potential because they do not know how to deal with their weaknesses? True strength is not only in the ability to overcome external battles, but in their own domain to face internal challenges. The Spirit of the Lord was with Samson, but when he broke his covenant, he lost everything. Even with his mistakes, Samson was an instrument in the hands of God. This reminds us that God can use even those who fail to fulfill their plans. However, the path of disobedience has consequences. If he had been faithful to his call, his story could have been different. How many opportunities do we waste on not hearing the voice of God? Samson had everything to live a glorious life, but his impulsiveness led him to a tragic destination. Samson's greatest teaching is that true strength comes from the Spirit of God. No matter how strong or talented we are, without it, we are weak. Ephesians 5:18, we urge us to be full of the Holy Spirit, for this is what enables us to overcome. Just as Samson had a second chance at the end of his life, we can also rebuild. The question is, let's learn from your mistakes or repeat the same story. As we reflect on Samson's life, we are challenged to look at our own choices and strength. How we use what God has given us to fulfill our purposes, or are we leading to the temptations that arise in our way? Samson's story reminds us that however strong we are, we need wisdom to manage our gifts and virtues. Without the Spirit of God, our victories can be empty and our fatal weaknesses. But the good news is that, like Samson, we can also start over. God does not give up on us, even when we fail. It always offers a new chance to those who regret and come back to it. Are you willing to learn from Samson's errors? Are you ready to use your strength wisely and within the divine purpose for your life? If you want to know more about how to apply these lessons in your daily life and not lose any inspiration like this, subscribe to the channel and enable notifications. Be sure to follow our content and live according to the purpose God has prepared for you.